Hey guys, it's Kevin. Welcome to the channel. Today's topic is chip war. In particular, I want to jump in and talk about some interesting angles in the Intel's position and how they're trying to establish themselves as or reestablish as a global dominant player in the manufacturing of advanced chips. We all know that Intel at one point in time was the giant in the industry. They had fallen off. We see an emergence of other companies that become dominant players. But there is some interesting coalition of partners that have coming together that are investing billions of dollars behind Intel. This includes the U.S. government, includes tech titans that you see on your screen, Intel and NVIDIA, as well as a Japanese investment bank, SoftBank. Why are they so bullish on Intel? Why are they pouring billions of dollars into Intel? Drop a comment below if you think you know the reason. But we're going to jump in and talk about the motives of all of those partners. But before we do that, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel. I think you're going to find this one interesting. I want you to stay and listen to the reasons for all of them. But I appreciate your time and listening. So we know that Intel has been written off for many years, but they find themselves to be in the middle of one of the most unlikely alliances that we've seen in modern tech history. So like I mentioned, why are those partners pouring money into Intel? What do they see on the horizon that you think we may be missing? Or maybe you know it already, please drop it in the comments. And what's at stake for them? Why is it so important for them to rally behind Intel and ensure that we're reshoring American domestic manufacturing here and we're working to build up our advanced chip production in this country? But before I get started, let's just land on the one thing that we know for sure. What all of them have in common is that we know that all of them find themselves in a position where we look at advanced chips, particularly of 3 NANDs, that they need for their flagship products, particularly Apple and NVIDIA. And we know that 90% of that production is coming from one country that is 100 miles off the coast of mainland China. And all of the players just find that this is too risky of a position for many different reasons, from a geopolitical perspective, from a supply chain perspective. And it is too risky because that company produces the brains, we'll call it, that is driving our iPhones, our PCs, and our AI supercomputers. It is a position that we have found, and someone in the government said we're in an untenable position and we need to do something different. And in fact, back in 2020, we did do something different. The government issued in or came forward with the CHIPS and Science Act. It was a $52 billion federal program that was designed to boost and accelerate domestic manufacturing here in the U.S. Because you have to remember, we were not always in this position. If you take a look on the screen here, you can see U.S. manufacturing. The gray bars represent the 1990. We had 37% share of manufacturing here in the U.S. Went down to 12% by 2020, and you see how it grew in the Asian countries. Guys, that was grown as we shifted money over to the Asian countries to take advantage of lower costs and generous foreign subsidies. But this created a challenge in this country where we lost capabilities, we lost learnings through the fabs, and we put ourselves at a competitive disadvantage. And Washington knew they needed to do something drastic. So as I mentioned, in 2020, they introduced the CHIPS and Science Act, major program to boost our domestic manufacturing, and they picked Intel as a key winner in that program. And in fact, when you look on the screen here, you can see the investment that was done in Intel. There was $8 billion investment that was provided to them so they could create new fabrication plants as well as packaging facilities in the U.S. We also provided Intel with a 25% investment tax credit for any building that they did, and they were awarded a $3 billion contract from the U.S. government. And then overall, Intel promised to invest $100 million in the country. And this was a critical asset for the U.S. The U.S. saw that Intel was a strategic partner to help reduce America's dangerous reliance on foreign chip makers, particularly Taiwan Semiconductor. But through the CHIPS Act, another interesting piece came up, or not through the CHIPS Act, sorry, when we had a shift in administration, when the Biden administration went out and the Trump administration came in, we saw a different angle that we haven't seen in the before. We actually saw the U.S. government become an equity partner in Intel. So Intel issued 275 million shares to the U.S. government, putting us at a 10% equity ownership in the company. In fact, the U.S. government is the largest single shareholder in Intel. That's a situation we haven't seen in the past. It's a very unique approach by the Trump administration, and in showing the importance of the seriousness they have in shoring up domestic manufacturing, but their belief, they're very bullish on Intel's ability to compete against Taiwan Semiconductor and compete against Samsung. And we know that when you see that Intel had a very bold, ambitious plan of 5-node improvement in 4 years. They went from the chip, which was the Intel 7, to the A18 chip, which is operating at 3 nanometers. So significant improvement in that short period of time, and they're promising more coming forward. So this makes Intel, this partnership or 10% ownership makes Intel a strategic partner for the U.S. government and a strategic manufacturer, and they're being treated as if any fab that Intel has is part of our strategic infrastructure in this boom. And they're going to be treated with the same seriousness as we do with our ports as well as our energy grids. Now let's move on to the two tech titans and what their position is here. And why are they interested in Intel? And that's very clear. They're interested in Intel because they have a dependency on Taiwan Semiconductor. Taiwan Semiconductor produces the overwhelming majority of the chips that drive the flagship products for those companies. And they find themselves at a poor negotiating position, and they also find themselves at risk that if anything ever happened, if China moved on Taiwan or if chip supply was disrupted in any way, they could find their customers or they wouldn't be able to deliver their products to their customers for months at a time, and it could have significant impact on revenue. So we know when you take a look at Taiwan Semiconductor, if it's Apple, whether you're looking at the A or the M chip that drives their iPhone or their Macs, Taiwan Semiconductor produces the vast majority of those chips. We also know when you take a look at NVIDIA, if it's the H chip or the A chip, those are also overwhelmingly produced by Taiwan Semiconductor. So a major reliance from them, and they need, short and simple, they need a plan B. They need to be able to trust that there is a second fab in case there is a crisis, in case there's an issue with supply that they could go to. They need to reshore domestic manufacturing here. We know that Apple has come on record and has said they would invest up to $600 billion over a few years. They've been very positive about shipping part of their production to the Taiwan Semiconductor fabs here in the U.S. that are being built out in Arizona, but they've also been very positive about giving business to Intel Foundry Services for some of their older models and starting a partnership. Same with NVIDIA. NVIDIA, as I mentioned, invested $5 billion in Intel. They have a 4% ownership stake in the company. And this is because they need a plan B as well. Overall, Apple and NVIDIA's motive is very clear. They need supply chain security. They need a plan B. They need to be able to have a different, little more leverage and negotiation when they go back to work with Taiwan Semiconductor. They need a second fab in case there's any crisis that happens overall. So guys, those are the main reasons when you take a look at Intel and what we're seeing with some of the partnerships, whether it's the U.S. government or tech titans. I didn't even get into SoftBank. We'll have to do that in another video because that's an interesting spin as well. But what do you think about Intel's ability to compete against Samsung and Taiwan Semiconductor? Are you bullish on Intel and their ability to produce advanced chips in the U.S. to reestablish themselves as a dominant player in this space? I'd like to hear your thoughts below. But before you leave, go ahead and like, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care, guys.